Our scriptures this morning are the Transfiguration scriptures. And this is the story of Elijah dying, and then Elijah sort of handing on the mantle to his protege, Elisha. It's from 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The company of prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Then Elisha said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. And the water was parted to one side and to the other, and the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." And Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." Bless you. Elijah responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them into pieces. I love the insistence of Elisha, "No, gosh darn it, I will not leave you. Stay here, Elisha. No, I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving you." And to all the people who are telling Elisha, "Don't you know that, Elijah's going to die?" He's like, "I know. Be quiet. Stop." I just love the humanness of Elisha in this. And it's a scripture. This is a story of this prophet Elijah dying, having time. It's time to move on. It's time to die. Of course, he does this miraculous type of death, but handing on his mantle to Elisha. And Elisha's both desire for that, "Give me a double portion of your spirit," like both a desire for that and a reluctance, like, "Don't leave, don't leave, don't leave, but give me a double portion of your spirit." Then in our gospel text of Jesus's transfiguration, we have Mark chapter 9, verses 1 through 10. It's actually 2 through 10. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his clothes became dazzling bright, such as no one on earth could brighten them. And there appeared to them Elijah, and there appeared to them who were watching Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us set up 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead could mean. I love Transfiguration. I love the magic of it, the mystery of it, the beauty of it, the splendor of it, this mythicalness, right? We're on the top of a mountain and Jesus is transfigured with light. Just a couple words before we hand over the mantle to Jan, to Reverend Berdewick for a star offering. This is the last Sunday in the season of Epiphany. We were going to do the star words on the first Sunday of the season of Epiphany, but this is sort of another type of revealing and a showing forth of one's true self, of the way that God's call has claimed Jesus in this story. And of course, the reflection for us is always, well, what does it mean for us? How has God's call claimed us? And how are we showing forth with that call on us? Both texts describe in poetic way the mantle passing on. I love the image I love the one of Elisha and Elijah that I've talked about. And then I love that image of Moses and Elijah with Jesus. And I have read it often as it's like almost like a succession story. Like here's Moses, then Elijah, then now Jesus. But actually, a different way to think of it is like kinship, a kinship story. And now Jesus is in profound company, right? He is part of this prophetic company. He is kin. He is one of. And imagine the power, like as if they were really there talking to each other, the power of the company of one another, people who have taken on the grace of God in their lives and then stepped into it in their own, the way that it's being asked of them, right? Who have taken on the mantle and embodied it with their own soulfulness. That mantle, that idea, that mantle of stepping into the taking of the mantle that is yours, that is ours, soulfully so, not just because we feel we ought to, but that is soulfully so ours. And just a word from my consistent spiritual teacher, John O'Donohue, that spirituality, he says, spirituality is the art of transfiguration. Spirituality is the art of transfiguration. And this line, we should not force ourselves to change by hammering our lives into any predetermined shape. We do not need to operate from the idea of a predetermined program or plan for our lives. Rather, we need to practice a new art of attention to the inner rhythm of our days and our lives. And he goes on beautifully to talk about a quality of attention to this inner rhythm. I put John O'Donohue's invitation to understand spirituality and spiritual practice and religion, I'd add, as an art of transfiguration. alongside our text today, and an invitation to say, remember, you don't have to force it. You don't have to force it. You don't have to force the taking on of the mantle that might be yours to take on. It's a quality of deep attention. And remember, you need company. You need kinship in it. You need people like Moses, like your Moses and Elijah, and certainly Jesus, who are going to accompany you in your transfiguring, who are going to sit with you and help your life to take something other than a predetermined shape. With that, we invite Jan up, Reverend Berdewick, and we're going to listen, we're going to receive words, we're going to hear from each other. Come on up, Jan, about how these words might have transfigured your year and may actually play into you helping to pay attention. Thank you, I made the link. Help you pay attention to the rhythms of your life in this year ahead. Yes.
I'm just,
Yeah, Betsy will catch up. She had to down.
oh, I guess we're good. I'm just laughing because it's really hard for a preacher to say a few words. But I really appreciate, I was going to do something. So here's your homework. Joke. I was going to spend a few minutes inviting people without us looking at it. For those of us who've spent our lives in church and Bible study and that, anybody who hasn't, you get a free pass. There's no judgment here, but see how many details of the Three Kings story, the visitation of the Magi, we could remember. And I know it's a wonderful story. I'm sorry, I'm really a nerd. So if I call it the text, I'm sorry. But it's a story that I probably could preach on, and I bet you could on the Transfiguration, but for 6 weeks in a row and not mine all of its riches. But the detail we're going to hear now is where's your star guided you? And I really appreciate it's the movement of the Spirit that Lindsay talked about, needing companions on the journey, because one of the things that you could preach a whole sermon or sharing on is about the importance of not going it alone. So let's just get right to the stars. Stars have been a source of guidance, both mystically, spiritually, as well as actual navigation since human history was recorded and before. There was a time, and I'm sure I say this every time I've done this here or any place else because it's so important. There was a time, I want to say 30 years ago, when the Navy, our US Navy, maybe others, stopped teaching celestial navigation by the stars, and supplemented it with replaced it with technology. And then they did a U-turn about 25 years later because they found that it could fail them. And so nothing fails in this hemisphere the North Star. The reason the North Star is so important and compelling, if one is trying to find their way, either lost on a mountaintop or at sea, is because in the Northern Hemisphere, it's the one fixed point. The other constellations and stars rotate around it, but it stays in the same place. And the only other thing I'd like to say before we hear from all of you and from me, those who wish to share aloud may. We'll check in with Zoom. And if I've left any loose ends flapping in the breeze, please let me know. But is that all these stories, whether it's the Transfiguration, whether it's Elisha, and how do you pronounce that other guy's name? Elisha, Elisha, or this story, is they were originally oral tradition. They're not meant to be history books. So if you don't see a star coming up brightly and hear voices, that doesn't mean you're not faithful. It means these are the stories of an oral tradition where there were no digital visuals, and they were just people gave people their rapt attention and storytelling in oral tradition. So Marcus Borg, whom some of you have heard Lindsay and I quote before, perhaps, he talks about the biblical stories as the language of love. And I'm sure I've said this before, but if I were to tell you my and compelling images so that people listen and remember. So if I were to tell you my grandmother was as old as the hills when she died, that wouldn't mean that she was X million years old. It means she was really old, right? So take these stories with a grain of salt, and I'm going to invite people to share before and I'm happy to share too, but I've gotten a big turn here. So where did your stars guide you in the past year? And often the journey takes unexpected twists and turns. So my star for the last year, and like many people, many of you have been more diligent and disciplined than I, but mine actually slid behind my dresser. But I did find it, and I have communed with it regularly, is alive. And I was grateful to get it. And I thought to myself, well, I already celebrate life because when I was 20, my dad had a massive cerebral hemorrhage, but it was a miraculous story, and I won't spend time on the details, but he had 13-hour brain surgery in New York City. He got an infection, and it just went on, and they kept saying he's going to die. And if we do the tests we need to do for the next procedure that might save him, he'll probably be blind. He could lose his cognitive abilities. So I've never been one since I was 20 years old to say, oh, I'm going to kill time or I'm bored. So I thought, rather not very humbly, what do I have to learn about being alive? And where the star led me, my alive star, is that I began to see that I needed to pay attention, and this was over time, over weeks, to what was it that made me feel truly alive, like about how I spend my time or where my focus should be. And that's been a great teacher, so I'm grateful. So thank you to all who shared. Thank you to those who are thinking about this in the silence of your own hearts. And we're going to, I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to do this, just to pass this around. We will be drawing stars for members of our congregation who are apart from us in body, but with us in spirit, such as Shirley, such as Betty and Alan Jack. There are a couple of you who've asked for stars for friends of yours. So we will be picking out stars for them. And then if you have somebody you want to have us send one, or you can take it, that's fine. So we'll pass this around, and the thing I would say is I would ask you not to look at the stars, and then before you, I'm sorry, in other words, say, patience, that's not for me, and or whatever, and just pull it. And also, you know, these what I was talking about with Lindsay earlier this week, the seasons of the church year, you know, you hear us talk about Christmas, Advent, we're on the threshold this week of Lent. They're reflections of different contours in our own spiritual journeys. They're not tied to a date. So Lent has to teach us something about slowing down and reflecting, because Lento, and music literally means, I think, to slow. I'm looking at my gallery of experts here. So it may be in the middle of the summer, we need to have a time of reflection and a resurrection and openness to new life. So they're teachers, and this teaches us to think about what it is that shapes our days and our lives and guides us. So I'll pass them around and we'll go from there. What?
Glow in the dark stars in the basket. So you can take a word star and then a couple glow in the dark stars, just to help you remember that the light shines in the dark.
So, okay. And I think and so I'll come around with these and pick it up and you can take it from there.